girl could not rejoice over her mother's cure, for she no longer had a heart, and she could no longer feel for others. The girl became a woman, but she didn't notice it. She walked through her life empty and unaware, but only her mother noticed the change, for all the intimacy and love between them had gone, and they lived their lives next to each other, not together. And the mother was very upset by this, for she did not know that her daughter had traded her heart away. The girl felt no love for anything, not for the sheep she had cared for so lovingly before, not for the green hills which she had walked on all her childhood years, not for her mother, not even for herself. She did not feel anything. Only once, when she had to kill a sheep that had broken its legs, she felt something terrible stirring within her. And because she yearned to feel again, she sought out this feeling. In time, she noticed that the suffering and death of others would bring her a moment of release from the emptiness within her chest. So she began to kill bugs and spiders first, then mice the cat had brought in, a newborn lamb, and later even the cat. And it became an addiction, for even though she no longer had a heart, she remembered how it had felt. But her mother never noticed any of the cruelties her daughter committed in secret. After several winters had passed, a young man rode by the cottage, who was sent by his father to find a suitable girl for marriage. When he saw the young woman standing with the sheep, he was struck by her beauty. In that moment he knew that he could have no other wife than her, and so he asked her, and she agreed to marry him, because she did not know what else to do. The mother was happy, for she hoped that her daughter would find happiness with the young man, who was well-spoken and seemed to care a great deal for her daughter. And even though the man noticed that there was no love between him and his chosen wife, he thought to himself that love might grow with time. And they lived together for some time, and even though there was no love between them, he was happy. One day the woman fell pregnant. Her husband was overwrought with joy, but in her, the deep, dark feeling stirred whenever she looked at her swollen belly. When the child, a girl, was born, the husband often caught his wife looking at the baby with a dreadful look, but he pushed these thoughts aside, for he could not believe that his wife was evil. But she was tempted every time she saw her child, and in time the pressure in her became too much. So one day she took a knife and went to the crib in which her daughter was lying. When she raised the knife high over her child, the husband, who had entered the room unnoticed, threw himself in front of his daughter. The knife pierced his heart, and with a final breath he sank to the floor. Trembling, his wife let fall the weapon and fled the house. She ran as fast as she could, never looking back, and was never seen again in this part of the country. Her mother, who had heard of the events, came and took in her granddaughter, and cared for her lovingly. But she was growing old, and with every day more of her former strength left her. Then one day the grandmother died, and the girl, old enough to walk but too young to survive on her own, left the house, for there was no one to care for her. She walked through woods, over hills and small streams, until she came to a road, where she lay down, for she had not eaten in many days. There she was found by some travelling folk, who took pity on her and took her in. With them she travelled far and wide, forgetting the place she had come from, and the people she had known as a child. She became part of the travelling folk, never knowing how different she was from everyone else. In the village she was born in, they never heard of her again, and they did not care, until later, much later, when the elders regretted not taking care of what had happened in the little cottage in the rolling hills. And this is how the story begins. 1. Fifth War. Even though the Fifth War undoubtedly complies with the definition of war, a state of armed conflict between different nations or states, some scholars argue that it cannot be called a war, as that term implies that both sides have an equal chance of winning. In the case of the so-called Fifth War, invaders from the western counties took over the former Elasia, now the kingdom of Fur, and conquered and wiped out the unprepared Elasian people in such a way that some scholars prefer to call the Fifth War the First Obliteration instead. However, this term is unheard of in the present-day kingdom of Fur, as it is seen as treason against the current King Gint of Fur. A Guide to Military History. The creaking and groaning of the Vardo was my lullaby. It carried me forth from the endless journey atop the wagon, soothing my